is Christina Caron.
He was making bizarre claims, like he was Diddy's sex slave, and that Diddy had forced him to have sex with his girlfriend Cassie.
Diddy allegedly, and his son allegedly, shoot some guy in a bathroom. There are some major dogs that are not barking.
What if the biggest names connected to Diddy's trial are the ones no one is talking about? Candace Owens says she's uncovered a shocking omission that changes everything. Stay tuned as we reveal who's mysteriously missing and why their absence could be the key to the entire case.
I was like a sex slave. I had sex with Cassie and Sean.
He was making bizarre claims, like he was Diddy's sex slave, and that Diddy had forced him to have sex with his girlfriend Cassie, and that he had contracted an STD from them and then had sued. And then he also talks about like the Black Boule and the Illuminati playing cards, and he's like,
Relationship between Diddy and Cassie ended up being verified true and sounded insane at that time. He also says that Diddy's a member of the Black Illuminati and that he would hear him on the phone discussing matters. And the biggest thing is saying that there's a hip-hop agenda, and essentially they create these guys and enrich them, because really what they're doing, and in further parts of this video on behalf of the feds, is that they're moving drugs throughout the United States.
Candace Owens recently dropped a bombshell on her podcast, and what she revealed has a lot of people asking hard questions about Diddy's trial. In the episode, she suggested there are some major players connected to Diddy who seem to be vanishing. From the narrative, these aren't people with incidental ties or distant associations. They're individuals who, according to Owens, have been influential in shaping parts of his career and personal life. The fact that their names are absent from media reports and legal proceedings has raised her eyebrow in a big way. She broke it down simply. Why are these figures with enough power and influence to potentially sway the industry not being scrutinized? Alongside Diddy, Owens pointed out the glaring absence of certain executives and personalities who have been behind the scenes during some of the most pivotal moments in his career. She described it as a selective silence in the media and claimed it wasn't accidental. On her show, she alleged, when you start connecting the dots, it's as if an invisible hand is erasing key details and redirecting the conversation where it's safest. Some of the connections she outlined go deep. Owens specifically mentioned individuals tied to major record labels and entertainment companies who have worked closely with Diddy over the years. She questioned why these partnerships, which were front and center when it came to book projects and cultural milestones, are suddenly invisible. Now, for example, she brought up Diddy's involvement with past music ventures where high-ranking executives profited hugely from projects he spearheaded. She asked, why aren't they asked to explain their role in what went on behind those closed boardroom doors? Owens didn't stop there. She provided examples of times when these individuals either vocally supported Diddy or appeared alongside him during notable industry moments. It's interesting, she said, how these same people used to be faces in the crowd at his parties or front row guests at his shows, but now they've completely slipped into the shadows. Her tone was laser-focused as she added, people should be asking why. No one wants to follow up with them. Surely they weren't just spectators. The absence of these names, according to Owens, isn't just peculiar. It could indicate bigger forces at work. She raised questions about possible efforts to shield certain individuals from scrutiny, perhaps to protect personal reputations or larger business entities tied to them. This observation has opened the floodgates for speculation, especially as more people begin digging into past collaborations and relationships. One name she didn't shy away from mentioning was an executive she argued had been a long-standing force in Diddy's career and may hold crucial information. Owens said with a note of determination, this isn't a trial about one man. It's a layered story involving movers and shakers across industries. Whether this individual will face public or legal questions moving forward remains uncertain, but Owens raised doubts about whether justice can fully be pursued without including such figures. And yet, Owens herself admitted this isn't the full story. In the same podcast, she hinted that others might have more to say on these missing names. That's where comedian Theo Von enters the conversation, bringing his own perspective and revelations to light.
She was all over the lawsuit, and you've had people since that have brought her up, and Skylar, I don't know, we actually wouldn't even be able to show that. And again, this is all allegedly, but this was the Ghislaine Maxwell that was always at his side. It has been alleged by people who say that they were abused by Diddy, that she was allegedly placing IUDs in women. People that have accused him of like a very aggressive form of rape have accused her of being the person that made all this happen. In Little Rod's lawsuit, he was explicit in saying that she was the supplier of all the drugs. She's just gone. Like she's just, for some reason, they thought we have to take down Diddy, but it was very clear in Little Rod's lawsuit that Diddy was kept high intentionally because of her, because she was instructing people to keep him drugged, allegedly, on this pink cocaine, and she's gone. Like I could not find a trace of this woman on the internet.
That if Diddy's throwing all these parties, Universal Music Group is in some way financially involved. But the lawsuit alleges that they're directly financially involved. And the lawsuit alleges that Lucien Grange frequently attended them and probably funded some of them, and certainly had secret meetings, or at least allegedly had secret meetings with Diddy frequently.
In his bedroom.
Yeah, in his bedroom for an hour or more.
Grange has been a very powerful figure for a very long time. Started as with a totally different name, by the way. I don't trust,
you're the one that put me on that.
I don't trust men that change their names, least of all 3 times, okay? A family that goes from Goldstein to G to Grange doesn't make sense to me. And you have him at the top of the food chain, heavily implied by Little Rod that they were allowing this to go on to get blackmail on certain people, and they just disappear him.
And I mean,
what's the logic here?
It's
no
understandable.
Evidence. There's tapes. Little Rod said there's nothing but tapes.
Tapes of everything.
And that Diddy was taping the people that were coming as well.
Yeah.
When he's mentioned in a Little Rod lawsuit as the fixer, to show you how extreme what he's being accused of is essentially he's the guy you call if you shoot somebody.
Yeah.
He intimates this scene in the lawsuit, Little Rod, where Diddy allegedly and his son allegedly shoot some guy in a bathroom. Little Rod is as this guy is bleeding out, cleaning up, trying to help this guy. He's very close or just outside of the bathroom. Little Rod might have been in the bathroom. And he knows that after Diddy and his son come up and shoot this guy, he's trying to apply pressure to the wound. And they know that you have to call this guy, and he'll get the correct person over at LAPD to come over, and they'll tell a lie. And he says that the next day the press ran a story that there was a drive-by shooting, and he's like, that's not what happened at all. And it made me really think about the book Chaos that so many people on my podcast have listened to and watched. I have listened to, and it's describing a corrupt LAPD with feds that are involved and know how to disappear certain things. And we know that to be factually true based on the Charles Manson murders. So this makes me super uncomfortable.
The Von isn't exactly the first name you'd expect to pop up in a conversation about Diddy's trial, but when he weighed in, his comments created even more chaos around the missing names. Candace Owens highlighted on a recent episode of his podcast. Theo joked about how big stories like this seem to shed a lot of light while keeping some people safely just out of frame but beyond the humor. Theo appeared to back Owens' claims, suggesting that certain people connected to Diddy might be deliberately avoiding attention or worse, being protected. He touched on a name that's lingered in the background of the entertainment world for years. Someone who has quietly influenced deals, campaigns, and industry trends, and whose ties to Diddy have remained surprisingly unexamined. Without naming anyone outright, at first Theo spoke about how certain power players often operate behind the scenes. It's not the loudest person in the room you got to watch for. He said it's the guy who's too quiet to be noticed, hiding in the corner, like a shadow moving real slick. Many assumed he was talking about long-standing business executives who worked with Diddy on major projects. These were individuals who, according to past reports, were instrumental in catapulting Diddy's career to the highest echelons of fame and financial success. Theo passionately questioned why these figures haven't been pressed for insight or accountability. I don't think it's just one guy on trial, he said, lowering his voice for emphasis. You have a whole crew that helped build and protect a legacy. His tone shifted from playful to reflective as he continued painting an image of an intricate network of influence and control operating far outside the public eye. Unlike Owens, whose presentation relied heavily on researched connections and industry analysis, Theo leaned into anecdotal experiences. He recalled hearing rumors in the entertainment circles he accesses as a comedian. There are whispers, he said vaguely, about deals that should have been blown up years ago, but they weren't because someone somewhere made a problem go away. Now, I'm not saying I know specifics, but I do know there's something unsettling when certain names never seem to come up. While Theo's credibility on the matter isn't what Owens brings to the table, his words hit a nerve because of his earnest approach. As someone who's been in proximity to these worlds, yet not embedded in them, he offers and outsources his raw take. This makes his questions resonate with everyday audiences who might already feel the case is more complicated than it seems. He admitted he had no intention of becoming the face of criticism here, but his willingness to pose these questions publicly was enough to turn heads. Theo concluded his rant by referencing an unnamed media mogul he believes should be investigated further. This figure, according to Theo, is someone whose professional rise mirrors Diddy's in many ways. By tying them together, he aimed to spark curiosity about whether their paths intersected. Outside the official record, he didn't expand beyond that vague hint. It wasn't his style, but his implications left room for more questions than answers. And while Theo's tone stayed measured, there's no doubt his comments added another layer of pressure. If Owens's research started the fire, Theo's perspective is fanning the flames together. Their remarks are creating a level of public speculation that Diddy probably didn't anticipate. But how has Diddy reacted to this unfolding storm? That's where things get intense.
Do you know Sean Combs?
Puff Daddy?
Yeah.
P. Diddy, whatever you call himself
Yeah.
these days. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, he's part of what's called the Boule. The Boule is a branch of the Illuminati.
Okay.
It's the black people. I had settlement with Sean, okay? And he belongs to that agenda. That's why he's so famous. They land all the contracts. It's these attorneys. Basically, he would masturbate and tell me what to do with Cassie. I had like 15 encounters, and I heard lots of business. Because what they would do is Sean talks a lot on the phone and on the TV with speakers and stuff, and I'll be in the...
I've never really quite understood why Diddy's fame has lasted this long, why he is so wealthy, how he's doing all of these extravagant things. Like, genuinely, I've never really quite understood it. And it's just interesting because when three things that seemed so crazy end up fact-checking true, he also mentioned in this, we didn't show this clip, but he mentions pink cocaine.
Yeah.
At that time, no one knew what he was talking about. Suddenly, Lil Rod's lawsuit is speaking about that exact same drug that he's saying is a combination of all sorts of drugs like MDMA and cocaine. But he says that essentially that's what Diddy is giving out at these parties that has people that is so high, rather. And then another piece of this, which we didn't show, which he said at that time in terms of saving Trump, was he says that he saw in the Illuminati card deck that they were going to try to assassinate Trump. Again, what year was this that Jonathan Odie was arrested?
That was 2018.
And we can also now confirm that he was indeed a sex slave to Cassie and Diddy because he's testifying at this trial.
Behind-the-scenes reports suggest that Diddy's reaction to the mounting claims from Candace Owens and Theo Von has been anything but calm, while Diddy has kept a stoic front and public sources close to him describe a man struggling to manage the firestorm now surrounding his trial. Combine that with the media buzz about the so-called missing names, and it's easy to see why the pressure is starting to build privately. Insiders allege he's been visibly frustrated, often questioning why these narratives are gaining traction and who's fueling them. According to people familiar with the situation, Diddy sees the claims from Owens in particular as a strategic attack on his credibility. She isn't just pointing fingers at him, she's implying that there's an entire network of powerful individuals who could be complicit or at the very least, avoidably silent. This kind of narrative strikes at the foundation of the public image Diddy has spent decades constructing. He's not just a star, he's a mogul, someone who prides himself on control, and control is something he's reportedly losing grip on during this trial. Rumors have begun surfacing about tense conversations within Diddy's legal team. One insider allegedly claimed that Diddy's lawyers are advising him to stay focused on the facts of the case and avoid distractions from external speculation. But that's easier said than done. With media attention already amplifying quotes from Owens' podcast, his team is said to be scrambling to ensure that these side discussions don't create ripple effects in the courtroom. This balancing act, defending him in court while managing the narrative outside of it, has reportedly left Diddy irritable and at times overwhelmed. Adding fuel to the fire, Theo Von's comments have only amplified the scrutiny. It's clear that Van's outsider perspective struck a chord with fans and skeptics alike. Some people online have even begun piecing together their own theories based on his vague hints and Owens' more direct approach. This has reportedly worsened Diddy's frustration as he believes these narratives are snowballing into something far beyond reality. This is spiraling out of control. One source allegedly quoted him as saying during a particularly heated conversation, the heightened speculation combined with his already demanding legal challenges appears to be taking its toll. Legal experts observing the case suggest that if the claims about missing names get any more traction, it could complicate Diddy's legal strategy. Public perception often seeps into the courtroom directly or indirectly, influencing everything from jury opinions to media pressure on attorneys. Analysts also point out that figures being drawn into the controversy might now face their own questions, potentially dragging out an already high-stakes trial for Diddy. This uncertainty is another layer of pressure. 1. He seemingly didn't anticipate recent reports paint an even more dramatic picture of Diddy behind closed doors. He was allegedly overheard expressing disbelief that Owens, a political commentator, and Von, a comedian, are now key voices shaping public opinion about his case, something he sees as unfair and almost surreal for someone accustomed to controlling his image, and branding this loss of narrative control might be one of the hardest pills to swallow. It's clear that these allegations about missing names are shifting the case's momentum, and while Diddy is fighting to regain control, the growing silence from some of these key figures is raising even more questions about the story behind the trial. But why is the media tiptoeing around these connections? That's where this gets even more complicated.
Interview that Tupac is still alive
Yeah.
and he's in Cuba.
Drops it out of nowhere.
And that's been a major conspiracy that Tupac's still alive. I've never looked into that one. I just want to be very clear. But because I'm going back and I'm thinking it's just strange that everything this man said, or too much of what he said, has fact-checked true, which seems so bizarre. That another very bizarre claim he made, that Tupac's alive, is in Cuba, and he's just like chilling and saying that. just kind of gets you thinking about
all sorts of other things.
what is reality?
All sorts of other things.
What is reality?
I also, while we're on the black boule thing, that Jonathan
Could you describe, by
brings
the
up
way,
the black
because
boule.
when you actually brought up the black boule, I had no idea what that was.
I don't know a lot about it, and I think that there's a lot of versions of it. As like, I think that it's like, Vatican conspiracies go all sorts of different directions. The Jew conspiracies go all sorts of directions. And the black boule, I think the understanding is that it traces back to like the black nobility and one of the royal families. And LeBron James does have a gigantic back tattoo of the crest, like the symbol itself of the black boule. Very, very literally the exact image. Or it's his chest, I think. It's
I
like
think it's on his chest. I think I saw that in your video. And
Kinda weird.
So that's interesting that he's saying he's a member of this, especially as we're now learning so much about what took place at these Diddy parties. And I want to be clear here. We can't really discuss Cassie's testimony because I try to keep this show family friendly, and I just
There's
can't.
not a single piece of that is.
That is right. I can't read anything about these transcripts. Suffice it to say, they were into just the most debased, disgusting sexual stuff that you could possibly imagine. She was very clear that she was high on drugs throughout, based on what we've learned from Little Rod and learned from other people, including this guy, Jonathan Odie, that was definitively one component of this. But it's interesting that we're talking about the idea of these people selling out the black community on behalf of somebody else, because there are some dogs that are not barking. That had me very concerned in this case, because I read through Little Rod's lawsuit and I very much expected that the Universal execs would be brought into this into the hearing at the very least to testify. And also the biggest person missing here is Christina.
If these names are as significant as Candace Owens and Theo Von Tess suggests, why isn't the media diving into the story? That's the question swirling around the edges of this trial. And it's got people questioning whether the coverage, or lack thereof, is part of a larger, carefully controlled narrative, while Owens and Vaughn are calling out what they see as glaring omissions. Mainstream outlets are staying surprisingly quiet on the matter, focusing instead on Diddy himself and avoiding the broader web of connections. Fans are starting to speculate about. Some argue that it's not unusual for media coverage to center on the headline figure in a trial like this. Diddy is the star here after all. But others find it strange that high-profile individuals who played visible roles during key moments in his career have barely been mentioned in the press, despite Owens' repeated emphasis on their importance. Take, for example, executives closely tied to Diddy's biggest ventures, like record labels and cultural events that defined an era. Those partnerships were once plastered across magazine covers and entertainment news segments. Yet now they're nowhere to be seen in discussions about his current predicament. It's as if they've been scrubbed from the narrative entirely. At least part of the media silence could come down to PR power. Large companies and influential figures often have teams working behind the scenes to shape public perception and limit negative coverage. Media consultants can strategically bury stories, redirect narratives, or steer the press toward safer angles to protect their clients' reputations. In Diddy's case, this could explain why certain names, though undeniably connected to key periods in his career, are conveniently being sidelined. One entertainment journalist speaking anonymously described the phenomenon. These executives and stars have relationships with the same outlets covering this trial. The industry doesn't just tell stories, it decides which ones are safe to tell. There's also the legal aspect to consider. Lawsuits, particularly of this scale, often come with strict gag orders or carefully worded public statements. But on top of that, there's the lingering fear of retaliation. Owens herself hinted at this during her podcast when she mentioned that some individuals might be working to avoid scrutiny because they're embedded in the entertainment ecosystem. She suggested that exposing these people could lead to a chain reaction, one that would disrupt long-standing systems of influence and control in the canned. Whether it's fear alliances or outright interference, the media's selective coverage has compounded the tension. Audiences are left wondering what's being left unsaid, and more importantly, why. But if these names are deliberately kept out of the headlines for a reason, it raises an even bigger question. How might their absence shape the outcome of Diddy's trial?
Made a video about him, and then
You
the other
did.
one,
I copied you.
right? And
Yeah.
and then that was the first time that that we kind of started interacting on content, and that rabbit hole started to go pretty deep. Diddy's head of security is named in this lawsuit, and he's named in this lawsuit as kind of the fixer, the guy that makes things go away, which is already pretty suspicious. And then one of my followers commented in my comment section that, hey, that dude was Michael Jackson's head of security. So I started digging into that, and that's absolutely true. And when you do the math, Michael Jackson's head of security, Fahim Muhammad, also Diddy's head of security, he graduated college like 1 year before Michael Jackson died in his care as his head of security.
One
and
of two people that was there. It was the doctor.
Second on the scene.
And it was him.
And he graduated with a business and marketing degree with a specialty in real estate, which does not sound like head of security material to me.
Could these missing names shift the entire course of Diddy's trial? That's the question looming over this case as Candace Owens and Theo Von's claims ripple through both public opinion and media coverage. Their remarks aren't just idle speculation. They're introducing a layer of uncertainty that could have real consequences for how the trial plays out. As Owens suggested, leaving certain figures out of the conversation doesn't just raise questions about fairness. It opens the door to new scrutiny, new evidence, and potentially new witnesses. Legal analysts are already weighing in on what this means. Some argue that if any of these individuals, those Owens referred to as key behind-the-scenes players, are forced into the spotlight, it could shift focus away from Diddy as the sole figure under examination trials. Especially high-stakes ones like this depend heavily on narratives, and introducing more names could muddy the waters. What's more, if these connections point to larger systems of power or further allegations, it's possible the scope of the trial could widen. Dramatically, suddenly, what seemed like one man's legal drama becomes a broader investigation into the industry itself. This isn't without precedent. Past cases in the world of entertainment offer examples of how missing connections can eventually become pivotal. In the case of Harvey Weinstein, for instance, initial reports largely centered on his individual actions, but as investigations expanded and more names emerged ranging from enablers to silent bystanders, the case transformed. The ripple effect was unmistakable, with careers destroyed, institutions overhauled, and new legal battles triggered. While the specifics of Diddy's trial differ, the underlying principle remains: who's left out of the room can be as crucial as who's put on the witness stand. Jury perception is also a factor here. One legal commentator noted that introducing new names, especially influential ones, might paint the trial as less black and white than prosecutors would prefer. These revelations could give the defense room to argue that Diddy's actions were part of bigger collaborative efforts rather than isolated misconduct. On the flip side, it might encourage the prosecution to dig deeper, investigating whether others benefited from or shielded him in ways that could incriminate them. Either way, it adds complexity to an already tangled case. Now think about the judge and legal teams. Judges are tasked with keeping proceedings focused, but high-profile cases are rarely immune to outside distractions. Media buzz, or even public whispers about additional names can seep into the courtroom, altering how certain testimonies or pieces of evidence are weighed. Defense attorneys, too, may use the noise to their advantage, steering blame toward these unnamed individuals to dilute their client's responsibility. Every public mention of who could or should be implicated puts more pressure on all sides to respond, but public opinion might be the most powerful force at play. As Owens and Van's assertions gain traction, people are starting to ask questions. The legal system hasn't yet addressed. Social media is filled with speculation about these hidden names, with fans and critics alike highlighting old photos, interviews, and business ventures that appear to support the idea of larger interconnected relationships. This groundswell of curiosity doesn't just create intrigue, it pushes for accountability, and that accountability could be the key to unraveling the full story of this trial. So how far will this go? These missing names don't just add heat to Diddy's trial. They may unlock the context that ties everything together. Will they be the threads that pull apart the fabric of his defense, or could they cloud everything so thoroughly that the truth, whatever it may be, remains buried? One thing's for sure, as the focus shifts, the entire case could hang on. How much or how little is finally revealed. The names missing from Diddy's trial might hold the answers that no one is asking for. Candace Owens believes these individuals could reveal critical truths, reshaping the case entirely. The Vance comments only added to the intrigue, suggesting figures in the shadows may know much more than they're letting on. But why aren't these connections being examined? If the media and legal teams continue to avoid them, are we losing sight of the bigger story? Share your thoughts. Could uncovering these names change everything? We think we know the truth could be closer than it seems, so stay tuned for more.